for those children who are more at risk, meaning they suffer from more anxiety, they worry about other people think more than others. They are a little bit melancholy. Maybe they have been treated for depression already. We need to take a look at what are some of these triggers, and also what's the pressure that we're putting on them to be perfect. How are they feeling about how they look in school and their body and what their body looks like? And, especially athletics, academics, getting into college. And then once they're in college, what happens if college isn't for them?
Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of I Love Being Sober, sponsored by Camelback Recovery, Arizona's preferred sober living option to help AA newcomers stay sober during their first year in the program. If that's you or someone you know, then you're in the right place, because my name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery here in the always sunny and always sober Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people to stop their suffering and continue on their path to recovery. Let's get clear on one thing. We believe that a relapse or a slip is not a part of recovery. And that's exactly why this podcast is dedicated to you or any loved one you know in their first year of striving to live a clean and sober life. The purpose of this podcast is to come clean with all of the misinformation that's out there about recovery, addiction treatment, mental illness, and the strategies to stay sober in general. So if you believe you're in the right place, or if you know someone who is struggling with addiction, it's my privilege to share this podcast with you. Now, I have no idea if you and I have ever met, but what I do know is that AA saved my life. And I also know that to find long-term recovery and live happy, joyous, and free, it's not just about stopping your drinking, drugging, gambling, sexual indiscretions, or any other addiction you may have struggled with or suffered from. Because at Camelback Recovery, we believe that sobriety can and should be fun. Look, any recovery process is not easy. It is challenging, it can sometimes be annoying, and for the most of us, it is often difficult to stay on the path. But here's the good news. The self-awareness you gain from listening to this podcast, especially if you are in your first year of recovery, will help you make better choices, which will ultimately lead you to living a kick-ass sober life. Visit camelbackrecovery.com to learn more about our treatment strategies for alcoholism, drug addiction, or mental illness. And we even offer recovery coaching so that you can enjoy the freedom and happiness you've always searched for. Today, I'm here with Erin Matlock. She is a survivor of suicide, and she has struggled with depression, anxiety, and shame. Erin is a coach and advisor whose integrative approach attracts media personalities, New York Times bestselling authors, elite athletes, and highly visible entrepreneurs as she guides them through intense transition and rapid growth in their professional and personal lives. An international TEDx speaker, Erin boldly challenges the stigma of suicide through deeply personal accounts of survival and public recovery. She is author of Worth It, a book, her viral poetry and essays, founder of Brain Summit, and a conceptual artist working at the intersection of sculptural paint and language. Erin's paintings hang in private and public collections in the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Italy, Japan, and France. Today, Erin and I are going to talk about how to overcome ongoing destructive thoughts and self-worth. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. And thank you, everyone, for coming along this journey with us today.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And I met you at a Genius Network event here a few months ago, and I've seen you around. I saw you at the Celebration of Art, where you were performing art and selling art. And it's so cool. I'm really looking forward to learning more about you and your background. So I guess let's start with that. Tell me about your background.
I would love to. I am an advocate for suicide prevention, for surviving. I started to have challenges with suicidal thoughts and tendencies about the age of 15. And that was a whole different time. I'm 48 now. So we're looking at a time where we didn't really have the internet. We didn't have a lot of information, and people didn't talk openly about feeling like harming oneself. From the ages of 15 to 30, I had 4 escalating attempts on my life, 4 psychiatric hospitalizations, many psychiatrists, therapists, group therapy programs, all of which are the reason I am still alive today. Go ahead.
Okay. So where did you grow up first off?
Well, Ohio, first 10 years, then lived in Louisiana, and then I spent the majority of my life in Texas.
Okay. And did you have any siblings?
One, my brother.
One.
Older.
Okay. Older brother. Okay. And then when did you start having, like, do you remember your very first thought of suicide?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I remember my first, but I would say it was around the age of 15. And it wasn't as if what had happened, as I was always a very isolated child. I was well liked. I did well in school. My parents stayed together. They're still together. Thankfully, they're still alive. Grew up in a really loving household, but I was always challenged with expressing myself, with the need to please people, and not being able to manage how the depth of the emotions that I would feel. What seemed to wash off other people didn't wash off me. And as a child, that was just extremely challenging. So at 15, we moved. We had already moved to Louisiana. We stayed there 5 years. I got adjusted. That move was difficult on me too at age 10.
Now, did you struggle with depression? I know that you said your first suicidal ideations you recall were around 15. Did you struggle with depression, anxiety, shame? Did you struggle with any of that prior to being 15? Like, in other words, did it progress? Was it progressive?
Yeah, it definitely was. I didn't know what depression was, and we didn't speak that in my family. So I wouldn't have been able to term it that, or anxiety. We just didn't. I didn't know any kids who went to therapy. And I think we had one family on my street in Midwestern that was divorced. I mean, that was the 70s and then early 80s. So I wouldn't have been able to even be aware that any of that was happening to me, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. I mean, and I would say if you don't know, it's like, what's this feeling? What's this pressure in your chest? I remember the first time I remember there was a period of time when I was sober, I had this feeling in my chest, and I remember talking with a therapist, and she said, it's depression. Yeah. Depression is to press down. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. So it makes sense. You don't know what it is, but you're feeling something that's uncomfortable. Is that right?
Sadness, deep sadness, and a separation from other people, not understanding why I felt so different, so uncomfortable in my own skin.
Right.
I felt out of place. I always felt like my skin was burning. And I was well liked. That's the thing. I was athletic. I was very good in school. So I could perform to a level that no one knew anything was wrong. But as a small child, just dealing with that fact of having so much self-hatred or shame that I felt different, or I'm 5'10". Right. And I've been 5'10" since I was 13 years old, 7th grade. And so I was 5'5" by like age 10, which is the size of a grown woman.
Yeah.
To be introverted and shy, I'm very reclusive. Like, it's just, I like to be alone. I don't like a lot of attention. And so to be that tall, I remember always asking God, like, why would you make someone like me that tall? Because there's no place to hide. Right. And there never was a place to hide. I always stood out. You can see my old childhood photos. It's like all these kids, and then there's me.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's one of those things you can look back at and laugh, but at the time, I bet it wasn't funny.
No, because then I dealt with body image issues, and that I felt bigger than other kids, and my body was growing in a different way than other girls. And I remember even in 7th grade, I hope they don't do that in schools now, but the gym teacher brought in a scale, and we weren't getting on the scale, and she wasn't telling everybody our weight, but we were doing this thing in gym. I don't know, this training, and we had to have our pre-weight and then our after weight. weight. And we all had to get up and get on the scale. And I just remember thinking I was going to die because I knew, and I wasn't even overweight at that time. I was an athlete. I was very muscular for that size of child. But I mean, I was a grown woman. I wasn't going to be 90 pounds like the other girls. I was going to have a grown woman's weight who was 5'10", which was a huge weight. And just to have even her see it, and, and she didn't care. She wasn't shocked. But those are the type of things that maybe some kids would recover from. They'd be upset or hurt feelings. That shook my world to the point where I didn't want to go back to school. We really didn't have homeschool at that time. I should have been taken out of school. My parents had no idea how these things affected me. I just had almost no resilience. So going to school was just so painful each day.
So you had a lot of shame around that, would you say?
A lot of shame around just feeling so different and not being able to make sense of who I was.
God, that must have been so hard, because when I think of shame, I think of guilt leading to shame.
Yeah.
And the guilt is because when you lie, cheat, steal, you have guilt, and then it leads to shame. So here you have this shame that is really from nowhere.
Nowhere, just existing as a human.
Gosh. So did you? Okay, so you said that you moved, right? That's where I kind of interrupted you. So let's go back to when you moved. What was that?
So we
like?
made 2 moves, and one when I was 10 from Ohio to Louisiana. And then we stayed 5 years there as my father was progressing in his career. And then we moved into Houston in the middle of, or right after my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
So I switched
tough. That's a tough time to move. Those are both tough times to move, right?
Yeah. And I think if my parents could do it again, we would probably choose differently, but you can't. It's like, this is the career of the person who is paying the bills, and every parent deserves to have their dreams fulfilled too. My brother did fine moving.
Right.
So it's like, it was just, all these things just play a part, and it just happened to be who I was, and I didn't adjust. Going from a small Catholic school, I'd been in Catholic school my whole life, to my first public school that was 4,000 kids, or almost 4,000 kids, from a 400-person high school. There's a lot of things that just stacked, whereas somebody else's child would have been like, a new adventure and new friends and a bigger school, and how cool is this? It was just the end of the world that I could control. I had zero control, and it was a very difficult school for me to kind of break into.
Now, did you turn to drugs and alcohol?
No, I didn't.
Wow.
And I don't even know why not. I don't know why I've never struggled with drugs, because you would have thought I would have self-soothed. I didn't even soothe with pot or cigarettes. And at the time, because I was very athletic, I didn't struggle with my weight. I was never naturally thin. I always had to be on top of the weight. But I was always, and that's probably one of the things that saved me, is athletics my whole life. Definitely. Having something to hang on to.
Well, I guess if drugs and alcohol are the solution, sports can be the solution too.
It is. Right. Whatever you have to grab onto, you grab onto it. Yeah. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it could be helpful in smaller doses. Right. Sometimes never. But yeah, no, it does surprise me. And I turned to writing. I did a lot of writing. And I think I white knuckled it, which sounds really bizarre. But the other thing I had going for me is a very strong, loving, secure home. And I think about that, it's just me and my brother and my mom and dad and the dog at the time. And I was very lucky to be in a household where those things were things I held on to. What would happen to them if I left this world? And even as a teenager, right, sometimes break from our parents during teenage years, and there's a lot of drama, and there certainly has always been some drama with me. But the fact that we had I think, a fairly healthy as it can get, no household is perfectly healthy, that helped me hang on. Yeah. And not start, or make an attempt on my life that early. It wasn't until about 23 that I made the first attempt on my life.
Okay, so you started having suicidal ideations at about 15 years
15.
old.
Yeah.
And did it progress? Did it like how
Yeah. It was
go
tough.
back and forth?
Yes, because as I progressed through school, as I got through the sophomore year and I was able to get to junior year and I started to make my first friends because I really
Right.
didn't have friends it was just such a strange environment. I think you start to feel into how you're going to exist in school.
Mm-hmm.
I loved academics. I loved learning. So I had some really good teachers and that helped. But a lot of it, I look back and there's no reason that I would have survived that high school and that experience, that time in my life, because I remember how depressed I was every day, waking up with the dread and the anxiety, and then going to school and walking through, and you just walk through so raw and numb. And for some reason, I think I was just such an obedient child. I figured this is what I'm supposed to do. And academics was very important in my household.
Okay.
And so I was supposed to achieve, and that's what I did. I worked to achieve.
Okay, so you make it through high school,
Yeah.
and then what?
Went to college. So college is kind of funny because college looks like depression. It looks like addiction. It looks like all of these maladaptive things because you can sleep late, you can stay up all night. People are doing drugs and they're not considered, anything wrong with it. And people are having sex all over the place. I mean, it's just like everybody's college experience is different, but where I was, it was in Austin, University of Texas. It's just wonderful school. And I mean, everybody was all over the place. So I fit in because people were sad. People were not sad. People had anxiety, panic. It's just, I could mask and just hide in plain sight. And I think as long as I had a goal to hang on to, which was graduation, then there's something to work for. And we know that when we look at whether you're going to quit cigarettes or when you're first getting sober or working on self-harm tendencies, that the longer you can distract yourself from taking the puff, from using, from harming yourself, that the more we exercise, the more we strengthen our ability to hold off on the urge.
Yep.
And I think that's what it did. Is I had this goal. I was going to graduate, and it allowed me to function as a depressive, in college. And I had really good friends. I got out of that high school, which was just a horrible environment for me. And I was accepted. Austin is a very accepting town.
Yep.
And I felt loved, and I had a new family, which were friends who were not perfect. They were all like me and in different ways. And so in that, I had really strong support.
Did anybody else know that you were struggling with depression and anxiety, or was it like, did you completely keep it to yourself?
Yeah, it was completely kept to myself. Yeah, I know.
Wow.
That was my whole life. But there was a time, and I think that's how my parents were raised. It's just, you kept things inside your home. You didn't tell the world about what was going on in your home. And those were the times that we lived in. And so I was a very obedient child, and I bought into it, but I also saw it mirrored back to me. And, and I just wasn't aware. I wasn't trained in the way that I am now, that I could look at someone's dysfunction and understand the layers that build to get to that level of dysfunction. I was a kid.
Right. So now let's talk about your first attempt at suicide. Yeah. What like, how did leading up to that, like, what was it like leading up to that first attempt?
I was going downhill. I was having a lot of trouble with anxiety that was so fierce that I would just shake uncontrollably at things. And it was just this feeling like you're going to be killed, even though it wasn't like I thought someone was coming to kill me, but you just think you're going to die. Just the littlest things. And I had graduated. So I was working towards graduation. I graduated. Everybody came up. It was a really fun time. And within the next 3 months, I just downward spiraled. I had taken an extra 6 months to graduate. I changed my majors a few times. And then I was going to go to grad school. So I was going to spend that spring applying to grad school for psychology, for counseling, and get in the fall. I'd already taken my GRE and all of that and was fine. Everything was going to be fine. So I had a lot of free time all of a sudden for the first time in my entire life. I didn't have structure. I didn't have academics. I didn't have something due other than a stack of grad school applications. And I was just free falling. It was like the first time you get to sit with who you are. And it's the first time you get to sit with your shame, your grief, your loss, your anger, your resentment, anything that I pushed down my entire childhood all of a sudden had all the time in the world. And it came out in just absolutely excruciating anxiety to the fact that I couldn't be alone. I remember having TV and radio on, and I would jump in the shower and just jump out because that time in the shower I thought would destroy me because I would be all alone in the shower. I was living by myself at the time. And so that first attempt was more, I would say, when people talk about a cry for help, that was a cry for help. That was not I'm ready to die. That was I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know who to talk to. We don't go to therapy in my home. We don't have this. I'm not that child. All of these things that had kept me from getting proper treatment, especially during college.
So what should a parent or a loved one be looking for if they have their child or someone in their home that they're close to? Like, what are some of the signs or the red flags that their loved one is potentially going to commit suicide or attempt at committing suicide?
It's a really difficult question to answer, only because so many young people and us grownups are really good at hiding.
Right.
We're really good at having still great grades or performing in athletics. The time we're recording this, we're coming off of a string of really devastating young female college suicides of high performing athletes. So we're looking at people saying they had great grades. They were All-American. They were on these winning sports teams. They had everything going for them. They were fulfilling their scholarship. We're really good at masking and hiding. And so the thing is that instead of, I would say, looking for signs, I would say being that kind of, even if you term it annoying, that person who says, we're going to talk about this, we're going to use the word suicide. Anybody who has a child in school, that school or that district has experienced a suicide. Right. Even down to the young ones, right? And so not being afraid to talk about that and also to talk about this is, I think, one of my problems was when we look at young people, they can't see what you and I can see at this point. What does happen if you lose your scholarship? Can we talk about it? What would happen if you lost a scholarship? Can we process that as a family? Right. Okay. Can we go through that? What would happen if you failed AP English? What would happen if you bombed the SAT? What would happen if that boy broke up with you for your best friend and you saw them at the junior high dance? These are the things I think is our young people, these types of failures. You and I know that life is about a string of failures. Yeah. And it's how we rise back and what we learn from these failures that spur us on to our greatest joy and our greatest passion. But young people don't know that. Right. And they can't see that because they're not ready for it. So if those of you who are parents, can really start to process with them and help them understand that they are not going to go through any of that alone. And understand that they may be worried about disappointment, especially with young people too. What happens if someone spreads a photo of you that was supposed to be private for someone? Can we talk about how mom and or dad can help you through that? What can we do? What would that look like? Because odds are they have a friend who's gone through something. Because when we look at when suicides with young people, there's, especially with the super young ones, there's usually something that happens with school, with the peer base that has been that straw that breaks the camel's back. Right. And if we can really nurture them to talk about these things so that they know there's a safe place to come to. What happens if you were drinking and you get in a wreck in that car? Can we talk about it? There will be consequences, but
Right.
How do we process that? How do we go through that as a family?
It's like, what's the worst case?
Yeah, right? It's like, because I think too, so often, and I didn't want to disappoint my parents. And so we hide things as young people from our parents or our coaches or whoever it is who's that authority figure who we respect. And then we feel we're all alone. And when we can't problem solve, we don't think there's an answer. Mm-hmm. For those children who are more at risk, meaning they suffer from more anxiety, they worry about other people think more than others. They are a little bit melancholy. Maybe they have been treated for depression already. We need to take a look at what are some of these triggers, and also what's the pressure that we're putting on them to be perfect. How are they feeling about how they look in school and their body and what their body looks like, and especially athletics, academics, getting into college, and then once they're in college, what happens if college isn't for them?
So your first attempt, how many attempts did you have? So your first attempt was a cry for help, right?
I really do. I feel like it was just a matter of, I don't even know what to do here. I'm a young woman and I just need somebody to come help me and fix me.
Are most attempts cries for help?
See, I don't think so. I think that most attempts are a human being who has no other way in that moment of stopping the pain. When you see progressing attempts and you wonder, why hasn't that person succeeded? Or do they just continue to need attention or whatnot? It's not necessarily that. You see as someone who is fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. And there are certain triggers in life that will just throw you to your knees. And when you try to get up, it punches you out. The longer you go, and I look at my life now at my age, and you wonder, like we just had, the death of Naomi Judd. I mean, this is someone from my childhood. I grew up in Texas, right? We love the Judds and country music, and some of you may not listen to country music. She was in her 70s. She fought her whole life through bouts of depression, suicidal depression, and you can come in and out of that. Not everybody has to go in and out. Some people go through a phase, they recover, and they may not have any issues until, it was part of life. We lose loved ones in life. Sometimes a trigger like that, really deep triggers, can reactivate it. But other than that, it's really something in the past. You might be like me, where I have phases. I still have to deal with the urge to leave this earth. And so I have to work my recovery in a way that is pretty aggressive. And I know that she did too. And so you look at that and think, well, how does someone get what you got that far? So how can you have everything? You're rich, you're famous, you're adored, you're beautiful. You have the big house, the great daughters, and all of this, but it's the illness. And I think that with addiction, it's not really selective. It's there.
So your last, how old were you at your last attempt at suicide?
So 30. I was 30.
Okay, you were 30. And would you classify that as a real attempt?
Yeah. So the last two were 3 months apart. And this is what it ended me in a coma with life support, all of that. The reason they were 3 months apart, and again, this was really in the early stages of the internet. I bought a book. I ordered a book, How to Die by Suicide. I don't think that book's around and everything. I was very serious about understanding what I needed to do. And, and I want to be really conscious of people who are triggered. So, to talk about modalities and things like that, and I want to be really careful with people because I know I can get triggered too, is that I know there's the question of, well, if you tried, wouldn't you try a different way? And if you really wanted to die or end your pain, wouldn't you try a more violent way? And that's not necessarily true. And it would be a whole nother discussion that we could talk about. And it's a little bit more, based on data and demographics and all of that. But the thing is that I was looking at a way that I thought would be the least pain I had been in enough pain. I also was looking at a way that I thought would work. I had worried about other things messing up and leaving me even in a worse case than I was, but still alive.
Okay.
So you hear stories of people who, and his name is escaping me. He's a wonderful speaker. And there's a documentary on him where he jumped off of the Golden Gate Bridge. And while he jumped and he survived, and he's out there and he's talking about survival. And after he jumped, he knew he had made the wrong decision. He knew, and he was so fortunate to survive and to be able to live this life. I woke up and I was devastated that I woke up. And that's where I differ from someone who says, oh, that was a bad choice. I made the wrong choice. And it was this, in an instant, in a knee-jerk choice. It wasn't for me. It was years and years. It was a lifetime of pain and isolation and the absolute worst pain that I would never wish on anyone. And I think that happens with addiction too, is that you would never wish what you have to go through on anybody. I don't even think there's words to describe the depth of sadness and despair that comes from long-term, like major depressive disorder. And in that, it was awful that I woke up. And that's very hard for maybe a loved one and very scary to hear, because there are those feelings of, well, how selfish can you be? There are people who are fighting cancer who would love to be alive right now. And that's where shame comes in for mental illness. And believe me, I have those thoughts of, who am I to be living when someone else who has children, or a husband should be living, and they're right now, succumbing to cancer. But the issue is, this is my life. This is your life. And I can be right here. And the reason I talk about this is because I represent millions of people all over the world. And we're trying to understand how best to help people who are struggling daily, weekly, monthly, most often daily, to stay alive, to stay upright, no matter how much they may love someone. Depression is stronger than that. This illness is stronger than that. The thoughts are stronger than any kind of love you could have. So I knew that I was going to get it right when I woke up. So I did everything I needed to do. I got back in with my therapist, saw my psychiatrist, got out of the hospital, got in my 72-day hold, the psych hold, did everything, was the apt patient, and placated everybody that I was in recovery, when I knew it was just a matter of time until I had everything I needed to properly end my life. And it's one of those things that is so hard for people to understand. And if I hadn't gone through it, I will be very honest, I would never be able to understand the choice. But having been through the pain and the fighting and decades of just fighting to exist and doing everything that you're told to get well and be happy and be strong and be grateful and stop being selfish and all of these things, and to know that it's just never going to work. That's the belief, that it's never going to get better. So the last attempt was, my father was out of town. I had moved back home. That was another sense of shame. I was 30 years old, moved back home, living at home, could not take care of myself. My friends were married. They were having their first babies. They were climbing the corporate ladder. And I was someone who had excelled at school and all of a sudden was a complete and utter failure at life. That's the kindness too that we have to show people who are battling mental illness, is that I deserved the respect and the kindness and compassion, including from myself, that someone battling cancer would receive. And I never gave that to myself. I work very hard to give that to myself now. Right. So that one was interesting. I knew that I had it down. I knew I had my formula. I knew what I was doing. Yeah. I everything was there. And I also, the timing, everything. Anyways, I was found unconscious and lots of things gone wrong. Taken to the hospital, and that's where I was in a coma, and put on the breathing machine. And they gave me, prognosis guarded, which means we don't know. because it was too late for them to pump a stomach. So they have to let the overdose process and then see how the body can take it. Can it withstand? Can it live? And so that's what happened. I woke up. And in that time, they had me strapped to the bed, which is not something that they do for fun or, because it's simply a lot of times too, especially when you've made an attempt on your life, you're very disoriented. You're coming out of a coma. They don't know your state. And if you're still suicidal, they have no idea. And so there was this reaction when you wake up that you're going to pull the tube out, which can paralyze you, can kill you too, but it can definitely paralyze you. So you're strapped down. It's very disorienting to wake up and be on a machine and only be able to look up and not be able to move your hands and legs. So it was a really horrifying moment in my life. And I think one that took a lot of therapy to get through that trauma.
Right.
I realized someone's watching going, well, you created that trauma, but it's an illness that creates that trauma. No normal, whatever normal is, no healthy human being who is capable of processing their emotions would choose that. So we have to start honoring what it is. And what it is a choice to end unbearable pain of not being able to stand up to that kind of pain any longer.
What, this may have been a question for earlier. What was it like having relationships with people? Did you have good friends?
Yeah.
Okay. And then like boyfriends, dating, so you did all that stuff, but you essentially faked it?
High performing depressive.
Okay.
High functioning. What is it? High functioning depressive.
Okay.
Is we have those people with eating disorders, people with addiction, people with all kinds of things that can perform out there. And it's just a very painful experience. It's a very lonely experience because you're trying to connect to people, be there for them. And it's not like there weren't moments of joy in my life. There was moments of laughter, and there are things that I enjoyed about life. There was just deep, dark pits of low times that would take someone to their knees. And then there's those voices of this is just too much and I can't take it anymore and I can't do it.
Okay. So you have your failed attempt at suicide and you wake up and you're like, damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Again, I was. So that one was okay. So I grew up in Catholic school, parochial school, Christian family, and I really believed in this kind of male God figure at that time. And I want to respect everybody's beliefs, including my own in this conversation, because it's an individual thing. But I looked up at that scene because I couldn't move anywhere. I was just flat, strapped down. And I was like, okay, God, you went. Yeah. You're not going to take me. And I was really mad at God because I felt like, what kind of God puts someone through this and won't just take them home? And that's a very tough thing to deal with. So, because I don't know how you feel, but I definitely felt betrayed in my life for having to go through every day that kind of pain. That's tough. So I had made the decision because I was really worried at that time because I thought, okay, I'm only 30 and my body clearly is strong enough to withstand these. And I felt for sure laying on that bed that God wasn't not going to intervene. And if I tried again, no matter what I did, because I really made sure that what I did would kill me, that I would survive again, but I would do irreparable damage to my body in some way that, and again, when you come out of a coma, you're kind of still, they kind of induce it with dopamine to let your body go through an overdose. So you're a little bit hallucinating. You're not thinking as clearly, but I thought I could lose an organ. I could lose my ability to go to the bathroom. I could have to wear a colonoscopy bag. I could lose my ability to walk. Like all these things went through my head of, I can make this so much worse and I'm still going to have to live because my God, the God that I believed in was just going to keep me on this earth. Yeah, okay. And we just have to hang on to whatever we hang on to. And that's when looking back, it was like, who knows if that's right or wrong? I couldn't tell you that, but I will tell you it was a turning point because I made a decision there to say, no matter what. And I remember laying in that bed, no matter what, I was like, I'm not going to get married because who's going to want me? And I'm never going to have that high powered job to make my parents proud. And who knows if that was what was going to make them proud, but that was in my mind. And I said, but I will, I'm going to live this life no matter how bad it gets. I'm just going to stay alive. And that's the promise I made to myself that day. And I still hold myself to that promise.
And how did you go? So how did you go from wanting to commit suicide and being pissed that it didn't work to now you're here to help people and you're helping, and that's what you're doing. Your purpose is helping people overcome ongoing destructive thoughts and increase their self-worth. So how did you go from point A to point B?
It's a long road. It's a long road. And I would say to anyone where I was then, and even spending several weeks in the hospital, then still getting thrown into a psych hold because those are the laws, right? It's all about lawsuits and everything like that. And coming out of that and trying to re-enter life, it's a long, this October is 18 years, which I still can't even believe it's 18 years. Yeah. But those first few years, it's baby steps. It was just such baby steps of not even leaving the house for so long. And I had come out of there, and one of the blessings was.
Did you still live with your parents at that time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I could not function and able to work. Like, I was so fragile and so unwell. I had blood clots in both my lungs, which are very serious issues that can turn deadly. So just coming back from that, and I remember it was 2 minutes on a stationary, like a little recumbent treadmill we had in our home. 2 minutes was my prescription, and it took everything in me to do 2 minutes.
Wow.
And those 2 minutes were because your lung capacity, everything is gone. And leading up to those last two attempts, I was in bed for a year in a dark bedroom in my parents' house. So I was unrecognizable as a human, and everything that I had was atrophied. So working up to 10 minutes. And I'm a huge believer in exercise. I know that you are too. Love the book Spark. Was it John? Is it Rady? Do you say it Rady or Ratty? Ratey. And that was so ahead of its time with what exercise can do for our mental health. It's one component, but that was a big piece, is that starting on that recumbent bike and knowing that I had to, because it was prescribed, because I had these ticking time bombs in me. And for someone else, they might say, well, who cares, because you wanted to die anyways. But that's another piece that is, a whole different nuanced conversation about why people choose the way that the method of suicide and what it means. So no, I didn't. I was terrified of these clots in my lungs. And so I listened to my doctor, and I took it easy, but I did the prescribed exercise. And then, I got past 10 minutes. And as you know, then I needed more.
Yeah.
And so then I started kind of researching a little bit and reading about high intensity and kind of interval training. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Of doing just a minute of really hardcore, and then the softer, and then, so it was 9 minutes of soft riding and a minute of hardcore, and all of these things. And I had no idea what they were doing are just repairing the neural connections, repairing the way that my nervous system functioned, repairing my heart. We know about all of those good things that physical exercise does for us. But as far as our mental health, what exercise can do. And in that, at that time, I don't know if you remember, but Sudoku puzzles were all the rage back then.
Yeah.
So, because I was getting bored, we didn't have Netflix or anything like that. So you turn on the TV, and if you even have cable, you never knew if anything was on. But I was like, I started to spend an hour on that bike, and it was 9 minutes.
Well, and kind of on that note, I mean, a lot of times, because I'm super into health and fitness, and
I know you are. Yeah.
And people, I mean, like, hey, it's not just physical. It's all of it. It's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. It's all of it. I have one of my friends, his name's Tom, and he never worked out, like never, for over a decade. And he started going over to F45. And he started out going 2 days a week, and he's like, okay. And then next thing you know, he's going 6 days a week. And I remember him coming to me and saying, hey, I know I'm not supposed to work out every day. I'm supposed to give myself 1 day off, but do you think I could go every day? Yeah. And I was like, because the day he doesn't go, he mentally and emotionally, he's all spun out. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course you can go every day. Just don't go all out every day.
Right.
Like you got to scale it back a couple of days. You can go every day because it's not just about the physical fitness. It's emotional, spiritual, mental. It's all of it. There's so much more to it than just the physical aspect.
It is. It is. Whether you feel athletic or not, it has to be a part of a human being's life. And at least that's my opinion, my experience with myself. But I grew that so I got this clipboard. I printed out big jumbo Sudoku puzzles. I needed them big because I was writing the recumbent, and I had this pencil and I was doing them. And I didn't realize that was also helping me start to problem solve again and start to think again. And so here I was just feeling these natural inclinations, and all of these things started to stack, but I didn't stack them at once. I didn't go with this whole plan of recovery. I really didn't think that anything was going to become of my life. My parents and I were looking at group homes for me, and not like the recovery homes that you have. We're talking about long-term group homes for people because I think at that time you could take, if you were on a disability check or something, you could take a disability check, turn it over to a group home for adults who really can't live by themselves forever. That's what we were looking at, and which was just horrifying to me because that was never going to be my life. And so I was like, okay, well, all I can do is just feel into, and I was lucky enough to be able to live at home with my parents. Not everybody has that relationship, and it wasn't fun. Right. I'm going to tell you this. It wasn't fun for them. It wasn't fun for me, but I'm very grateful that they put a roof over my head.
Yeah.
And so from there, I had these old CDs, and I had this big CD player over by my bathroom. That was like, sometimes a little bit of a nerd with language. I love writing, and it was a vocabulary builder. It was like how to learn hard words or something. And I had a lot of trouble with my short-term memory. Like I was just from a lot of medications, a lot of things, from the trauma, from the depression. It'll take your short-term memory. So I had to, utilize a lot of different things. I couldn't remember if someone had called unless they left a voicemail. And this is when we still had regular phones. Like it was just, I had no idea if I'd called someone back. So I made a lot of notes. So I started to learn vocabulary words, these large kind of SAT words. And practice that just because I thought, well, I started to get curious about them. And I never explored more than that. I never read into it more than that, than to just say, what's the next thing? And I never put the pressure on myself. And I think that was part of it. And then there was a point where I was ready to walk outside. And this was a person I did not go outside for a year. I put on a massive amount of weight from being on antipsychotic drugs. The reason I was on antipsychotic medication was because I was suicidal for so long. So many different treatment forms didn't work. And it was getting to the point where the treatment team really was concerned I was going to lose my life. So sometimes, and especially back then, that was used to keep me asleep as long as possible while we try to figure out, like, how am I going to grow through this? How am I going to move through this? How am I going to survive this? The less I'm awake, the less chance I had of ending my life. Okay. Some people, I'm one of them, gain inordinate amount of weight on a certain class of drug. Other people don't, right? Okay. So I was, at that time, like, I wouldn't put on my contacts. I wouldn't go get my hair done. I wouldn't even do my hair. And I would only go through my bathroom vanity back to the shower and bathroom in the dark. And it had some sunlight coming through. But a lot of that was because all I saw in the mirror was a monster. I was just completely unrecognizable. And I knew if I had to put my contacts in, I would have to look at my face. So I stopped all of that, and I stopped even having lights on. I took a shower just by some sunlight. These are things that as you progress into mental illness, these are really things that stack on, and they take a firm hold in your self-esteem, your self-worth, your ability to love yourself and even get healthy and even think you could get healthy. So all of a sudden I started putting my contacts in. And that's why that's such a big deal, and I knew it was a big deal, because if I was putting my contacts in, that meant I was turning on the light, which means I was looking at myself, which means the exercise was making me feel better.
Okay.
Wasn't out in any bikinis at that time, but I was feeling, exercise will do that to you. It's like, wow, I don't even have to be like back in form. It was just all of a sudden there was a boost. And then I started to say, I think I'm going to go outside. We lived in a suburb of Houston that had all these trails and forest. And I'm going to go back, because I was a runner, I was an athlete. I'm going to get back. I'm going to start walking. And I thought maybe I could run again. And I would go out and I would walk through the forest. And my therapist at the time, Roxana, was talking, she goes, do you meditate? And I was like, oh no, we're not meditating, Roxana. I'm not going to be alone with the voices in my head. There's no way. So she had taught me, because it was like the Walkman time. There was like yellow Sony Walkmans. And then I would get, and then the iPod, I think, those iPod, and we switched to iPod. But it was a matter of like getting guided meditations. So someone else's voice was in my head. And I would walk out to Lake Houston with the meditation, and I would walk up and down Lake Houston, and then I would walk back. And that progressed into walk, run. And that progressed into running. And that progressed into running in rain and mud storms, and because it's Houston and that's what we do. And coming home feeling like you do after you do a mud run. You feel like a warrior. You feel good. You feel strong. And I started losing weight, and I started putting on muscle, and I started remembering more, and I started having moments of happiness, and I started doing sauna and a lot of things that were back in that time. We didn't have biohacking and all of that. I would have loved to have access to, things that we do, or cold plunges. I know you're a huge fan of cold plunges.
Right.
I don't know how you do it. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it.
We'll have to go sometime.
Yes, that's what everybody who cold plunges says, Erin.
It's not how you feel during, it's how you feel after.
I know, I'm just screwed. These are things that, again, someone might be watching saying, well, you were lucky because you didn't have to work. I still had kids that I had to recover with. I had to go to work, and I was lucky because I could take the time to live with mom and dad, not go to work, and actually focus 100% on recovery. And without that, I don't know, Tim, if I would have survived. People do survive. People do recover while still paying their own bills, while still taking care of children. I don't have children, a lot of things that go on, or maybe they're taking care of an older parent. This was my journey. And those were things that I stacked in order to start to come back. And to finish this part of that story, this was progressing over a year. It was a slow progression. And my father had just retired. My mother was a teacher. She refused to retire until my father learned how to be retired without her. So she kept teaching. So he was just retired. I was recovering from all of this. And it was tense. And I didn't drive at that time. I was just, there was a lot of things going on. So he would drive me to appointments. Other than that, I was just at home and then out exercising. And I had gotten an IKEA catalog, and I love the IKEA catalogs. And in the back were the artwork, and there was photography, large scale photography. And it was actually this. Let me take this and show you. It was that tulip. Okay. And sorry if I'm screaming in there. I saw that. And the thing is tulips are my favorite flower. And I remember my therapist during that recovery time, she's like, Erin, when you're walking through the forest, she's like, what do you feel with the flowers? And I was like, I don't feel anything. Depression robs you of your ability to have a favorite. I didn't have a favorite food anymore. I didn't have a favorite flower. Those things have to come back, and they do come back. Your love for your children will be robbed from you temporarily. When you have that severe depression, it takes everything away from you. So I remember her just kind of gently prodding me throughout the year of, what are you feeling? What are you feeling? And I was like, I noticed the flowers today. Still don't have a favorite. Still not happy about them, but I noticed them. And when that IKEA catalog and I saw the tulips, I felt my favorite flower. And I cannot explain to you. It's the little things that you know you're coming back. I knew I was back because I had a favorite again. And when you are depressed and when you are suicidal, you have no more favorites. It is just everything is gone. And so I didn't know how, but IKEA was like 50-minute drive down highways it was on the opposite side of Houston, and Houston is huge. And you know, a normal person probably would have asked a parent to drive them on the highways down to IKEA. But I went the next morning. I got up, I got in the car, and I drove on the highway, and I drove all the way to IKEA right so I could get there right when it opened, because there's no way I could do an IKEA with all the people in it.
Yeah.
And I did. I was like as fast as I could, because they force you to go upstairs and you got to go to the back.
You get lost in IKEA.
You get locked in it. They're so smart. And I went all the way to the back where the art was, and I grabbed it, and then I power walked it out to the checkout. I checked out, power walked all to my car, like put it in the trunk, sat in my car. And I remember gripping the steering wheel, and the tears came because I thought, I did it, and I am back, and I am coming back. And it was the first time that I knew that I would be okay. And because I could feel again. And I knew if I could feel again, that I could have a life, you know, and it wasn't about, I'm going to make this great life and I'm going to get married and fall in love. And because I couldn't see that far from there, and I was nowhere near there, but I knew I was going to be able to feel happiness and joy. I didn't know any more than that.
How long was that from your most recent suicide attempt?
From that was a good year. That was
about a year.
Yeah, it was about a year.
And that makes sense. I mean, recovery, like that first year, it's really, whether it's drugs, alcohol, suicide, like it doesn't matter what it is.
It doesn't.
You really have to work your ass off for a year.
They don't lie.
That's the milestone. That's the first milestone anyways.
That is the first one.
Yeah, that's the first milestone. The next milestone is 5 years, right?
Yeah. And it's a touch and go. I found it to be touch and go after that.
When did you decide that you wanted to help others?
So
when did you decide you wanted to carry, I guess we can say carry the message? Yeah.
I think it was other people continued to tell me, because I really am fine just kind of reading books and writing, painting, and then going out on hikes. I just never wanted attention. I didn't want anyone to know. I was so embarrassed about what had happened to me. And I was so concerned, Tim, that no guy was going to marry me. I was like 32, 33. And I remember when I moved to Arizona, and that was huge for me to make that move. And I was like, no one can ever know, because I might not get a job if I go back to corporate, which was very true. Who would promote me with all of this history? It was very, very true at that time. And what would I say to someone? But I was young, and I also was early in the recovery area, where I didn't understand that this is who I am. And it's what makes me incredibly challenging, but also incredibly wonderful. And that it acts as a filter for me. So that I don't have to do a lot of vetting of people or organizations if they don't want to date me, if they don't want to work with me. Cool. Because you saved me a lot of time and heartache, right? So I can now appreciate it. Like, let's just get out of the way. But I came, and so what I did is we were about to go through that huge recession. And I came up, and I was just kind of doing a part-time job. One of my best friends lives here, where I kind of got my feet underneath me, thinking about what I wanted to do full-time. And I just I would love to do something where I could work online. And I was really good at technical things. So I created a website around the brain. I did not create anything around mental health, because I didn't want it tied back to my story. I wanted to stay in what I was interested in, which was brain health and brain fitness. But I did not want to be that face. I didn't want to talk about what had happened to me. I wanted to just get on with life and live a quiet life that was private. I got really good at the online and created a network of websites, and they all revolved around the brain. And they danced around barely any. But the people close to me who knew my story and colleagues who knew my story would remind me that the difference is that extreme level of what I had, including waking up and not being happy that I was alive, still struggling with suicidal thoughts, still having to manage an illness that chases me, and being able to figure out how I'm going to live life, how I'm going to go after things that I want, and make that work, and also take my failures and stay standing upright. These were things that there would be people who would want to know how I'm doing that. It was still years after that I finally wrote a newsletter to a list that was used to just hearing about me as an organizer. And I brought all kinds of experts to talk to them, and all kinds of great neuro products or supplements or neurotechnology, cool things that were happening. And I started to write about mental illness, and I started to write about my story. And from there, it was just a flood of emails, a flood of messages, a flood of replies. People would find me on social media and talk to me about their family member or what they're going through. And I realized that it would probably be wise for me to share for the sake of someone who is going through it and feeling like, hey, I didn't wake up and was grateful to be alive, and I didn't kick it, and everything is great, and that's behind me. I'm still going through it. I don't understand why I can't stop feeling like this, and people think I'm selfish, and I can't feel love for my kids. And the shame that they feel, those extreme cases, I understand.
Yeah.
And so that's where it came from. It really came from outside of just realizing that, as hard as it is to talk about some of those things, that what I can do with my life is reach someone who is struggling today to stay alive. And that planning of today to end the life, to maybe say, look at what I'm doing, because I am not all cured and all things great. I am still going through this life and have to manage these thoughts and these tendencies. But I also live a life where I get to meet people like you. And I get to paint and go to an art show, and I get to, have a poetry book and hike and work from home, which was my dream. That was, as an introverted person, I was like, from home.
I want to isolate. I
want to isolate. And so these are things, but I also know that even, 18 years out this October, someone might say, well, how are you still dealing with this? And it's because some of us do. Not all of us, Some people will not struggle at 18 years out. I do. And so I'm going to continue to talk about it so that that person who was me, who was all alone and planning, today is the last day, that they might not have to have today be the last day, that they might come and live this life with me.
How does carrying the message, how does that help you?
So it's interesting. I don't know if this is how it is for you, but I always feel better when I'm helping people. And that is something I have to pay a lot of attention to, because those of us who have dealt with challenges like this, can do so much good for other people. And we have to remember to do that good for us, that we're worth doing that good and taking care of ourselves. So for me, I know that it's how I feel useful in this world. It's how I build joy into my life and purpose. It also is always a reminder for every night when I'm ending, I think of myself, like, what did you do today for yourself? So it's a mirror in how I helped others. And I have to have an honest conversation with myself. How are you helping yourself? How are you loving yourself? What happened today that you would never let happen to someone else? So for me, it's a continuation of my recovery. Yeah.
It's like, it's carrying the message. And when you carry the message, that's what leads to fulfillment. And that's really what we're all after, is fulfillment, right? We're after fulfillment. That's why, really, we want a big house, a fancy car, and diamond earrings. It's like, we want these things because we think that's going to bring fulfillment. But really what brings fulfillment is by being of service and helping another person. And I'm sure like for me, carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous and helping another person that is struggling, it helps me and it continues building my foundation. And I would imagine what I'm hearing you say is it's the same thing for you, is it continues helping you stay on your path. And you're the example too. I mean, right now you're a public figure. You've helped so many people that you're the example. So there's way more accountability for you now too.
I have created some public accountability, and don't think that doesn't play into some of the rougher nights. Yeah. That is a thought that goes through my mind, is how many people would I be letting down? And I'm at a place where I can have that thought. I think years back, I couldn't handle that amount of pressure. But that pressure is good pressure for me now.
Yeah. What do you still struggle with suicidal ideations today? Okay.
So it really depends on. See, this is where it's ongoing for me, working on boundaries, saying no. Okay. Tim, I need like a tattoo or something that says, Erin, you've got to say no, and that will be part of my recovery the rest of my life. Is really understanding the need to people please and to get approval, and to not disappoint people. So saying no allows me to remain in a state that is healthy for me. And so I'm really cautious about what I say yes to. And then I watch when I say yes and something gets out of alignment, and I can tell with me, it's like I'll have a really fast, rapid weight gain. That is an instant for me to say, you have said yes to something that is not healthy for you. So we're going to complete this. We're going to remove ourselves and we're going to learn from it. We're going to get our health back in order, our sleep back in order. These types of things, because what will happen is it'll spiral out of control where I'm so stressed out from things, I'm exhausted, then I'm punishing myself mentally, and it rolls into escapism, which is suicidal ideation completely. It's that old urge to just say, well, it's I just can't do it. I just can't do it. Then it's talking myself back, doing a lot of calming of the nervous system, a lot of being around, pushing myself to be around people who have really well-adjusted nervous systems. So there's that co-regulation is a huge thing. Isolation is a killer for people who have suicidal ideation. So we must force ourselves to be around people who are calm, who are in a place of peace, so that we can feel that with our body. But absolutely, instead of getting upset about it now, and I do get, honestly, Tim, I get frustrated sometimes that I'm still dealing with it, but it's just a warning sign for me to look back and say, what are the choices that I've been making to get to a point where I cannot handle everything I've taken on, and I've put my health at this type of risk. Let's go through and clean it up.
Yeah. And I think that's, you're definitely not alone in saying yes to too many things, which is, remember, Derek Sivers spoke at the event that we went to, and the book he wrote was Hell Yes or No, or Hell Yeah or No. And it's really, and I that resonates with me. And I really think about that. It's like, okay, is this a hell yes? If it's not a hell yes, then the answer is no. Because if I say yes to things that are just like, oh yeah, okay, I can probably do that, then the next thing you know, I don't have the capacity to say yes to the things that are a hell yes. So it's like, let me just scale it back here and only say yes to the things that I'm really fired up over. And I still say yes to things that I shouldn't say yes to. But I'm learning. I'm aware. I'm way more aware of it now. I can tell you that much.
It's the awareness, right? Is honoring the awareness. That's something too, is practicing being kind to myself. I was such an overachiever as a child that if it wasn't this moonshot, then, I mean, it wasn't anything to be proud of. And I'm telling you, working from home, it's like someone else is out on a yacht. I don't need to be on that yacht because that's not
Yeah.
I can get dirty out there. It's snake season here. It's like I'm out with the snakes. You're out in Greece. I'm good, because for me, I know what I want. And like you, sometimes we have to say yes to things because it's part of being an adult and paying our bills.
Right.
But overcommitting, and then also learning how to disappoint people. That's been huge for me. Of the fear of disappointing people would lead me to harm myself in order to please them, when it didn't even end up being that they needed me to please them. They would have never wanted me to say yes if they knew it put myself in harm's way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those are things too, to understand where I am in that, of because I can do something so quickly and so fast, because I'm good at dazzling people, saying yes to please them, and not even understanding of what went down in the background, and what almost happened to me physically and mentally in the background. That's unhealthy. That's an addictive cycle, I think. Mm-hmm. Those are things that, have popped up over this past year. And so since I've seen you last, which has probably been a month or something, a little over a month, everything other than things like this that I'm called for that feel good. This feels good to me. I'm in my home office. I get to talk to you. You don't hear me, and those things I say yes to. The work that I say yes to, and the things that I say no to are things that in the future, some of those will be a yes again. But for right now, I am too off kilter to be, it's like thinking of like speaking, right? The world is opening up again. And so there are opportunities to speak and get on a plane and go speak. This is somebody's dream. For me right now, it's harmful to my health. So those offers are no for now, until I feel healthy enough to be back out there. And you got to let it go, right? Because it's that fear of missing out. Well, will they ask me next year? Or will they be mad? Or all the things that we say to ourselves. And it's a matter of just like that, hell yes or no. If my body is saying I cannot do that right now, it has to be a no.
Yep, there you go. So we're coming to the end of the interview now. Is there a question that you wanted me to ask today? And if so, what would that question be?
No, I don't think that there is. I don't. I would say, when I still remember vividly that last night that I thought would be the last night of my life. And I had made peace with that. It had been so long of leading up to that night. And I remember not having anyone to hang on to, not meaning my mom or dad or something like that. I didn't have anyone who had recovered from something that even seemed like I would want to be like them. There was no role model for me. And again, people were not all over the internet talking about mental illness back then. They really weren't. I think Jane Pauley had come out and she was all over TV and the news at that time. And that was a big deal for people to be talking about mental illness on the TV. And even in treatment facilities, they would kind of bring in a student, or not a student, but a patient who had left and maybe was a couple months out or something, or further down the road than you, and bring them back in to kind of talk to us. But none of them resonated with me. I remember being really depressed about it because I would get so excited to have someone who made it. I love before and afters. I love success stories because I hold on to those people. And I just remember thinking, I don't believe you. I don't want, your life isn't what I want for me. And so I would encourage, anybody who might have had this conversation sent to them, or who's trying to understand more about themselves. Where I needed to know that someone like me had survived, and someone like me was okay. And not just okay, though. They actually had found a way to manage by doing something that made sense to them, that felt good to them. For me, I'm a creative, so I have to live a creative life. But that doesn't mean that's prescribed for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that today, if you are here listening to me and Tim has a compelling backstory too. I've listened to Tim's story, that you understand that I'm not going to promise you that you're going to come out of it and it's never going to come back. and that you're never going to have the thoughts again, especially if you're feeling like today is the day, tomorrow is the day, next week is the day that life is going to stop. For a lot of people, they come through recovery and they don't have suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts anymore. And I think it's wonderful. But I'm not going to promise you that. What I'm going to promise you is that you can take a journey where the hardest part is already past. You've already been through the deepest level of pain that you can go through. And everything from here is about restructuring very slowly, like I did. It was 2 minutes starting on that recumbent, old, clunky recumbent bike, because that's all I could do. And little bits, and I mean a lot of kindness, a lot of compassion, and patience with myself when there really was no more patience because I was exhausted.
Right.
But understanding that I'm one of the worst case scenarios, and I understand that. And it's not a badge of honor because I really dislike it. I want it all to go away. I never want to think about it again. I don't want to ever have those thoughts again. But understanding that I may or may not have those the rest of my life, and making peace with the fact that I can live a life that does have joy, that does have happiness, where I have free will, I have choices, and I have closeness to people, I have a reason for being here, is still worth any struggle that I may still have with my mental health. And in having that struggle, I am able to find even deeper purpose in my life. I remember going to bed that night and I was for certain that ending my life would make my parents' life easier. It would make my dog's life easier. It would make my friend's life easier. I knew they would mourn. Like, I understood that I would be hurting people. But I also felt like I was such a burden, especially 30, living at home, unable to produce as an adult, that I would be helping them, helping everyone. Because I was too expensive to afford. Healthcare was too expensive to afford. My mind kept telling me so many valid and good reasons to end the struggle. And I will tell you that none of that is true. It's just not true. And my mind will still try to tell me it's true sometimes. And that's the fight. I think sometimes with addiction too, the mind will still tell you, well, one drink won't hurt, or, this one time or whatnot. The thing is that understanding that and a reason for continuing even through the pain, when you're exhausted, when you don't have anything left, I just hope that something that I have said today, something in the way that I live my life and that I am still living my life, will help you to understand that the work is worth it. It's so worth it. And what can come of your life is worth any amount of continuing challenge that you may or may not have with struggles with depression, with anxiety, with trauma, PTSD. If you're dealing with bipolar, all of these things can lead to really serious suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and I would say, just like with one of the things that we say, and that I've heard, there's a guy named Ward. He always says, it doesn't matter how you feel, it matters what you do. And with AA, I mean, and I would say this is just like AA. It doesn't matter how you feel, it matters what you do. They've got to put in the work. You have to put in the work if you want to stay clean and sober, if you want to get to the root of your issues, if you want to get to a place where you're happy, joyous, and free. Just stopping the drinking and stopping the drugs that's not gonna resolve the issue. What's going to resolve the issue is doing the actual work, which is what I'm hearing you say.
It is work. It is work. And I will tell you, I don't know, I can't speak for you, Tim, but if I could wave my wand and make it so that it's not work for all of you who are tired and exhausted, I would take away the work. Yeah. Because there are days I am so tired that I'm like, this is just BS. This is just, I am like going into victim mode. And I'm like, why me? But the thing is it's just, we all have something. Some people are missing a leg. Some people are blind. Some people are type 1 diabetic. Whatever it is that we have, we all have something. This is what we have.
Okay. What's your advice? If you could give like 3 bullet points or 3 steps that people can take if they're struggling with ongoing destructive thoughts, if they're struggling with suicidal ideations, what are the like the couple of things that you would say, like, these are the things you need to do, A, B, C?
Yeah. I think a few things that are really easy. They're soft and easy, but they're ongoing that I still have to do is, one, just build awareness of the thought. And this is something that I was taught in therapy and I never thought would actually help. But it's like, when there's thoughts, the more you can catch them, which right now, if you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to catch them because they're going constantly. The more we can catch and just let them be. I don't even worry about challenging them at this point. When we just be kind to it. It's like, okay, there's the thought. There's the thought. That awareness, and there's data to back this up that you can, look into. But what it does is it helps to just bring down our reaction to those thoughts. It helps us to slow those thoughts and to lessen the amount of times we are strengthening all of the brutality that we say to ourselves or the comfort that we're having from suicidal ideation. The next thing, too, is to really look at your nervous system and how overactivated it is and how raw it is. And one of the places that I like to go to is just YouTube. And you look at like parasympathetic nervous system exercises or vagal tone exercises. And there will be therapists or coaches on YouTube who really have just calming exercises for you to do. One of the easiest ones, right, is we kind of deactivate this kind of like overactive thing, is that you take a deep breath in, you hold for 4, and you purse your lips and you blow out. And what we're doing is we're slowing the breath and we're telling the vagus nerve that we're going to turn from an activated, overactivated state to a calmer state. And what that will do is, the more you're able to do that, and there's like 20, 40, 50 ways to tell the vagus nerve that. And that's why I love YouTube, because they'll explain it to you. But these are things I still have to do. I still have to catch my thoughts every day. And I still have to do a number of deactivation exercises. Cold plunges are great for that too. I don't know if I'm going in the cold bath.
You can't even speak to it because you haven't experienced it yet.
Oh, but I see them. I see them. Yeah, I know. They don't all smile like you. But, so those things are. And the other one is no isolation. Like, this is a biggie. The isolation will kill you. It flat out will. It will strengthen those thoughts. It will strengthen the grip of any kind of mental illness, of addiction. You might be hearing my dog flap her ears back there. And so it doesn't mean we have to get out and go to parties and things like that. But I used to have this rule. And when you talk about those first 5 years, it was a matter of, in the beginning, that first year after I went to IKEA, I was allowed to stay home for 3 days in a row. That was it. After the 3rd day, I had to leave the house, even if it was getting in my car. And I remember all I could do was go to the Starbucks and get a Frappuccino through the drive-thru, but it counted.
Yeah.
And then over time, it became 2 days. And this was over a period of years. So I listened to you, Tim, when you talk about that next 5 years is work. And then it became 1 day. And by the time I moved from Texas to Arizona, I still was at a 2-day rule.
Okay.
And I had moved here. And so I was like, okay, if I'm at the 2nd day of staying in bed or staying home and isolating, I have to leave. Then it was 1 day. And I kept 1 day for a long time. I don't even have that rule anymore because I don't need it. But those type of rules of the preventing yourself, being kind, but no isolation, because that isolation will strengthen all of those thoughts, all of those feelings, and it gives this illness so much power, and it gives suicide so much power over you. Those are 3 things I still, to this day, easy, free, ongoing. It's just a part. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. Love
it. Okay, where can people find you? How can people find you if they want to learn more about you, if they want to follow you?
My website is erinmatlock.com. So it's ERINMATLOCK.com. And then you can just kind of search on social medias too. I'm out there. I'm just not there every day. And if you have questions, you can email me. It's Erin@erinmatlock.com is the easiest, most direct way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I truly appreciate you. I got a lot out of this conversation, and I'm sure lots of other people did as well.
I hope so. Thank you. And Tim, thank you for giving me all of this time. I know we went long today. Thank you for those of you who stayed with me. And this can be a triggering talk. So I know that, if you're feeling triggered, we should probably, the 800 number, Tim, I know you'll put it up in the description, but let me pull up, because that's another thing too. When you're going through this and you're suicidal, sometimes hearing from someone and about their history and about their attempts can be triggering. And I want to apologize for not having this ready. But I don't want to leave you here without. Okay, so in America, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. And I want you to know, too, that I have had friends and colleagues who have called suicide hotlines. But I just want to encourage you that these people are trained. They are there 24 hours a day, and they're there to talk to you about anything. And so reach out to them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think that's it. That's a wrap. Have a great rest of your day.